What is better than two psychics duking it out? Well, three of course, and that is exactly what happens in this fierce battle of a chapter, filled with enough reveals to keep us satisfied until the next one comes out. And like most One Punch Man chapters, we also get some fun Saitama moments as well, so let's not wait any longer and dive right in. The cover this time features Fubuki and Psychos in their school days, with a spiral behind them to indicate their psychic powers. In fact, it even hints at the whole third eye thing that Psychos is connected to. Having the chapter be called Epicenter not only points back to how important Psychos was during the Monster Association arc, but also to this new battle surrounding her. Not to mention how the swirling behind them looks like a tunnel through time, but we'll get to that in a bit. Back in the past, Psychos cheerfully told Fubuki about the progress they had made in their psychic group. She reveals that it was due to including demonstrations for people and not just giving them explanations. And this makes sense since it might be hard to believe otherwise. With an innocent blush on her face, Psycho seems almost unrecognizable from the power-hungry villain we have seen thus far. In fact, while she explains that it won't be long until the Society for Supernatural Research seizes control of the world, Fubuki looks unimpressed and almost cruel. Well, thankfully, we get that partially answered. Back to Psycho, she pushes her glasses up like a true anime genius, discussing a radical ESP group called the Invisible Hand, and how they see their group as a threat. Well, if I were them, I certainly wouldn't want to pick a fight with these two psychics, especially knowing what terror comes if you hurt Fubuki. The image of this rival ESP group certainly makes them out to seem evil, almost demonic, with flames burning behind them. Or perhaps this is meant to be the rage that Psychos feels, seeing as they called their research team just a group of school children playing around. Whatever the case, the Invisible Hand was likely thoroughly beaten because Psychos reveals that they are now a subsidiary of the research group. With a cold look, she continues to say, "Seems we made a good choice in letting them live." And so at this point I had to wonder if they might be a precursor to Tsukuyomi. But that answer will certainly come in time. After that evil glasses moment, Psychos goes back to being bashful as she admits that she's been getting more powerful recently. But of course Fubuki is still far ahead of her, and there is no need to even mention Tatsumaki as she is in another dimension of power entirely. During this exchange, Fubuki listens but says nothing, likely thinking about the ways that she'll be stopping Psychos' growth in the future. Even so, Psychos continues to praise Fubuki, revealing that in high school, she could already lift an entire 18-wheeler. And Psychos has struggled to just lift a human with her telekinesis. But that's what spurs Psychos on to try and improve herself in other ways. That involves researching a new ability to see into the future using the third eye, which we know that she successfully acquired. All she wanted it for, though, was to use it in the same way that Shibabawa did, predicting events and averting any disasters with it. Not only that, but her goal was more personal. Psychos knew of the looming power Tatsumaki had, and so she wanted to use this to fight and counter her unimaginable abilities. However, this was not for herself, but for Fubuki's sake. She even refers to Tatsumaki as the president's nemesis. After a lot of research, Psychos began to feel the effects that night as she tried to sleep. It began with a splitting headache so painful, she is covered in sweat and sees something. Something terrifying enough that all we get as the image is a page full of black lines scribbled over and over. "This is the future," she says. Following that look into what's to come, Psychos can no longer be her ambitious self, hoping to impress masses of non-psychics. Instead, she screams that world domination is utterly pointless. Pushing it further, she accuses regular people of doing nothing with their lives and even calls them a plague of insects devouring everything. What was it that she saw in the future to have such little faith in us? Whatever it was, Psychos feels like humanity doesn't deserve to be alive and should start again from zero, which we can assume means that she would like to create more powerful psychics to help change the future. These thoughts are driving Psychos mad as she sweats and grasps her head in horror. She then finally admits that there is nothing left to do but destroy them and have a clean sweep. It is clear something has happened deep in her mind. She asks Fubuki if she agrees even so, and as we know, Fubuki back then only cared about surpassing her sister and being the best. A total annihilation of humanity would mean no one for her to show off to, so of course she did not agree. But this is confirmed as Psycho screams in frustration saying, "You will regret this someday." In the previous chapter, we had this same angry speech, but without the context of knowing what caused the belief that people needed to be exterminated. We then return to the moment where the last chapter ended as Fubuki tries to capture a heavily wounded Psychos. As it turns out, Fubuki was able to subdue her and even broke her glasses in the process. As she recalls this moment, she wonders what Psychos saw to change her thinking so much. Saikos collapses, having spent all her power, and Fubuki carefully catches her, indicating some level of caring even now. That or a feeling of culpability for what Saikos became. Now unconscious and bloody from using too much psychic power, Fubuki looks down at her with worry. Saikos hadn't been this way before, so what changed? As she continues to hold her, Fubuki slowly moves her hand to her head, thinking, is the source of your madness something we'll find out when the future comes? At first, we could have imagined it was related to Garo and Saitama's nearly world-ending fight, but it is more likely that other thing. As soon as Fubuki makes contact, she is struck with something monstrous. It is the same unknowable, planetary-sized being that calls itself God hovering over them. A dark aura seeps from it and surrounds the two psychics. Fubuki cannot help the terror in her eyes and the beads of sweat covering her face. But thankfully her group members arrive to pull her out of that state. It may have been a trap to latch onto her the way it had tried with a vulnerable Tatsumaki. As Fubuki regains her composure, she says she has captured a very important person of interest, indicating that she was the reason the Hero Association had her imprisoned in the first place. We can assume that Fubuki didn't want her sold off to Tsukuyomi for cruel experiments though. As Fubuki's allies congratulate her on winning, all she can think about is the being she saw, and that is what leads to the present. Wanting to know what Saikos saw and what that massive entity was, she walks into the cell where Saikos is unconscious and surrounded by the men who made a deal for her life. The unmasked man looks shocked at her sudden appearance. After all, no one was meant to be coming down there. Fubuki shoots him a cold look as he just seems surprised that it is her. Maybe even afraid of who else might be coming. One of the businessmen of the Hero Association asks the guard what is going on since the sponsor was meant to have priority. And we can assume privacy to do as he pleases. The guard can't say much, not having a good explanation. And Saitama chimes in with, who are these guys? Fubuki cuts in though, shouting that the visit is over and they need to evacuate immediately. This sets off some alarm bells for the Tsukuyomi member, seeing as she didn't tell him to leave so she can visit, but rather so that he can escape. Meaning, something bad is about to happen. Fubuki continues on, explaining that the list of incarcerated people has been updated with Saikos' name on it. In other words, a certain ill-tempered small psychic with monstrous powers is aware of Saikos' location right now. Fubuki bluntly states that she will come to finish her off, just in case it wasn't clear. At that, we see Tatsumaki hovering over the base with a threatening aura. The ceiling above them begins to crack and split apart with ease, frightening the innocent guard. Saitama looks up at the damage, not as scared of course, but takes it as the source of the department's destruction. And he's probably not wrong. The Fubuki group's faces behind him are terrified, but he is purely annoyed at realizing who made him have to move. He may have his priorities a bit skewed, but oh well. Just then, Tatsumaki breaks through the ceiling, scattering pieces of rubble everywhere. Surprisingly, the Tsukuyomi person doesn't seem to be fazed by this. The Hero Association businessmen start sweating and panicking though. Tatsumaki immediately lasers in on Saikos strapped to the chair and unconscious. With an angry look, she says, why is she still alive? And that's when the fight kicks off. Fubuki and the mysterious man both launch psychic attacks to prevent any harm coming to Saikos as Tatsumaki drops as many pieces of concrete as she can on her chair. The man is struggling quite a bit to keep it back, and Tatsumaki just tells him to get lost, throwing him through the wall. Fubuki tells the businessmen to escape, while she and her group hold off her older sister. Those poor weak members. They can't even believe their ears. They're expected to fight too? That is the epitome of bringing a knife to a gunfight, except it's more like they brought a fork. Tatsumaki, acting like her usual impatient and aggressive self, demands to know what her sister is doing. She even accuses her of being brainwashed for wanting to protect a monster like Saikos. Fubuki doesn't say anything and is instead focused on keeping Saikos safe. And this is when we get an interesting twist. Tatsumaki is aware of everything and is even in on it with Fubuki. In fact, they were at dinner together discussing Tsukuyomi and their experiments. Interestingly, the outfit Fubuki had on for the cover of chapter 174 seems similar to the one she is wearing at the meal. Sure, the sleeves and necklace are different, but close enough. As it turns out, Tatsumaki knew Tsukuyomi was coming for Saikos. Oh, and she eats her spaghetti using her psychic powers. Of course she does. Tatsumaki also admits that despite not liking Saikos due to her actions, she wouldn't give her up to the organization that had done testing on her in the past. As she slurps her spaghetti like a child, turning into her comedic chibi form, she tells Fubuki to help her with a little act. Fubuki can't help but lean over and wipe the sauce from her older sister's face, even pointing out how bad her manners are. But who needs them when you can flick people away with a finger? And honestly, it's pretty surprising to have Tatsumaki admit she wants to protect Psychos for her own reasons. More mystery. I love it. Back to the fight at hand, the member of Tsukuyomi strikes down the Hero Association members so he can reveal his new plan, to take the psychic sisters back with him to experiment on. He also makes sure to destroy all the cameras in the room before revealing that. Looking just as menacing as when he had his mask on, he steps out from the hole in the wall with a dark aura around him. Tatsumaki takes his threat very seriously, especially since it includes her baby sister. Her eyes turn wild with anger as she says, "I guess there's been a tiny bit of progress in the development of artificial psychics." Whoa, now that is an interesting reveal. So Tsukuyomi's goal, besides wanting to see into the future, is creating their own psychic warriors. Fubuki does look worried as she thinks he is pretty strong for getting back up. Saitama, on the other hand, well, he's just mad because he knows who destroyed his house, and they don't seem to care at all. All you psychics can do is demolish things, huh? And it's hard to take him seriously when rocks keep bouncing off his head. Fubuki tells him that she is lucky he came along, which is a funny way of saying, "I made you," but sure. Saitama could care less, but she continues on about how she sees a lot of strength in him, even saying that she thinks he is the one who defeated Garo. But Saitama does not remember that whole time travel switcheroo, so he is not trying to play dumb like she thinks, and more rocks just bounce off his shiny head. Fubuki continues on, knowing how strong Garo was since she faced him for a bit before too. She reveals that he had reached a peak and ascended, which means that someone like Saitama, who defeated him, would have to be at the same level or higher. And we know it is actually much higher. Interestingly, Fubuki admits she has given up on gaining that kind of power, but can still recognize it in others. And that sends us to a shot of Tatsumaki looking demonic, with white eyes and her arms crossed as the Tsukuyomi guy uses all his power to try and fight her off. The clash of extreme psychic abilities lays to the floor of the room, splitting in two, with Saitama hovering over the giant fissure like some Looney Tunes character who ran off a cliff. Fubuki's eyes go comically large as she watches him fall down the hole in what looks like slow motion, with his arms raised and doing nothing really. Or is he doing a bonsai for finally being done with this psychic battle? The expression on Fubuki's face is honestly one of the best things ever. She usually tries so hard to keep a cool look and attitude, so seeing her panic at seeing him fall into a small abyss is hilarious. It's okay though, we know he won't be hurt by something like that. He ends up falling down to a monster containment floor actually. The demon level threats discuss how the power to the cages is already shut down, but now, someone has fallen just in time to be a meal. Considering these aren't even dragon level monsters, it is going to be easy work for Saitama. They may not be scary to him, but Saitama does wonder why so many are being kept inside the new Hero Association complex. And it is true, why would they need monsters? Unless they were doing experiments as well. Maybe after seeing what monster-human hybrids like Psychos and Garo were capable of. Anyway, Saitama takes it to mean that he shouldn't get in trouble for having two pets in his apartment if they can have a whole slew of these creatures down here. It's a pretty sound argument if you ask me. And that's the chapter. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.